Welcome to More Than a Few Words Marketing Conversation. This is your host, Lorraine Ball. And if you've been doing marketing for any length of time, either inside an organization or with organizations, you've dealt with multi-layer brands. It may only be two people, but it's a multi-layer brand. And to help me through how you work with organizations with more than one decision maker, I've invited Beth Trejo to join me. Now, you need to know about Beth is she is the pause here. She's the CEO and co-founder of Chatterkick, a social media operations agency helping multi-location, franchise, and regulated businesses create systems that actually work. I'm hoping she's going to share some of our tricks with us. Beth, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
I am too. And I want to start just with a little bit of definition because when you first started talking kind of about these multi-layered brands, I wasn't sure where you were going with it. So why don't you define that for me and for my audience?
My agency specializes in working with this type of dynamic, which is really can cross different industries and categories. But I always call it like the parent child relationship, where marketers tend to be stuck right in the middle and they're trying to handle stakeholders, many of which they may not actually report to, as well as individual locations. It could be a multi site location, it could be a dealer distributor network. Maybe they are all private equity companies, but they all kind of have multiple people in the mix. And so it can just be really complex when you're trying to deal with marketing. It's not just as easy as like, I have a t shirt, this t shirt needs to be sold to a lot of people. There's a lot of dynamics at play.
Absolutely. I came out of a corporate organization that had that, and I thought, I'm going to be working with small businesses. I can say goodbye to that multi layered mess. And then I met the companies where the son or the daughter was part of the business, or the cousin had taken one marketing course and was in charge. And sorting through that, where do you start? How do you figure out who the real customer is for the content you're creating, but also with all of the stakeholders? How do you prioritize? How do you figure out how to navigate this maze?
Yeah, well, I think it's first of all, as marketing, we're always kind of in the midst of also being in sales, and I think there's a lot of internal selling that needs to be done. It's the promotion, it's the hype, it's the getting people excited internally, just as much as you are, showing your products or service externally. And I think the other thing that's really important is make sure that you meet people where they're at. Even though we want everybody to be marketing minded and understand the dynamics of psychology and buying, that's not where everybody's always at, and that's okay. And so I think sometimes it's about being able to tailor your approach in a way that can be scalable and manageable, but meeting those individuals and not asking them to do maybe face to camera video if they are extremely shy and introverted, right? You kind of just want to get to them in a spot that feels comfortable in the beginning and then expand from there.
I can see so many applications for that of just bringing people into that kind of marketing community and making them feel a part of it so they have that sense of ownership when the campaign goes live, when customers start seeing those comments. What do you do, though, when you have someone in your channel who maybe came up through the marketing channel, has some real expertise? And because we all know in marketing, there's no one right answer.
Right.
I mean, that is the reality. But how do you navigate that when you really have someone in the channel that does know their stuff? And so you can't dial it back to bring them on board. How do you engage them and involve them in the process if they are a stakeholder and not a direct, or is it the same if they're direct in line or just a stakeholder? But how do you engage someone who really is a bit more of an expert?
Well, I think if you're trying to really look at for the greater good of the whole brand ecosystem, I think one thing, if you have someone that's a fast and furious like marketer, but maybe they're not in charge of marketing, I would definitely have them lean into their own personal brand because that is probably going to gain the whole company, content that you could reuse, repurpose. You could pull it from the brand side when you have the time or resources to do so, but they can go as fast as they want on their personal channel. It feels comfortable for them. And again, knowing that that is kind of your pool of macro content that you can distill down on a micro level that could be repurposed or reimagined on behalf of the brand.
So, letting people lean into their expertise, creating subject matter experts at every level of the organization. But again, let me come back to that person that really is a marketing person, that you've put together this campaign, you've put together this program, you're thinking, you're working through the launch, and they're like, yeah, no, that's not the right direction. How do you manage? Because that's very real world. It's very real world in corporate. It's very real world in small businesses. How do you navigate that when you're crunched in the middle?
Yeah, I think that's a really hard spot to be in. And I know a lot of marketers are in that spot. I would lean into testing because I think also we have to put our own egos aside and just create a framework for testing that you can always run some form of small experiments on, whether that's a inexpensive, it should be a fast, easy operational system that you can kind of work on your own program and then funnel in some of these additional requests into a testing kind of
Mhm.
cadence. And then the things that are working from that, you have data points to say, you know what, this did really work. Let's launch this. Or this didn't work. Let's revise it and test it again. I think it helps people who have high urgency that just want to come in and make their mark feel a little bit more pacified, as well as it helps the marketers who just need to figure out the 300 different pieces that you can't disrupt all of them.
Mhm.
And so that's one of the ways that I think could be helpful for both.
Absolutely. I loved back in my corporate days, I did a lot of what I'm just going to call on the edge marketing, stuff that made people a little uncomfortable, and I was like, yes, but this is going to work. And I, on more than one occasion, sat across from an executive, a sales manager who said no. And I said, let me just run a test. We're going to do it just in this little market, and then we can decide. And I loved having the follow up conversation when it worked.
Yeah.
you know, when the guy had told me that I was crazy, that that would never work, and the next time I saw him, he's like, well, we're thinking we could roll that out in three or four more markets. Yes, yes, you can. And so when you were talking about testing and having that data, it's so important, I think, as you're running into people who maybe are on the other side, and then also being willing to say, you know what, we ran that test and man, that was a mistake.
Yeah, I mean, consumer behavior and people's buying patterns are changing so fast across so many different categories and B2B, B2C. And I think that we need to constantly be curious and we need to constantly be pushing our own past beliefs because it's not the same. And I think you get the best outcomes when you have people come together with different views and different, ways of thinking. And then the middle is probably the best way, right? So I think there's a lot of that just is interpersonal skills and communication.
Oh, totally agree. And, as you were talking that, I was also thinking about that the reality is that you are often not the customer. And it is, I think, one of the hardest things to get used to is looking at a campaign and going, well, that really doesn't work for me. And then stepping back and going, but I'm not buying this product. And being able to not only put yourself in the customer's shoes, but get the stakeholders and the shareholders to go, let go of what you think the customer wants and let's look at what the customer really wants.
Right. Especially if you're dealing with a multi-site location or a franchise network where the people in one part of the country may have a totally different perception of the same brand. And so I do think when you are looking at localization, just how important it is to have that perspective, right? I mean, I think that's when it works the best is when that franchise feels like a small business in my hometown with the support of a national brand.
Yes. And acknowledging and allowing your multi locations, if you do have multi locations, to have a little bit of that. Yes, there's the consistency because if I drive into whatever retail operation this is, let's say, I have a certain expectation of what the baseline is going to be. But then being able to make it more personal and unique is a wonderful balance. Awesome. Well, Beth, this has been fabulous. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit about what is a multi layered, multi confusing art of marketing.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
I really appreciate the conversation, and I'm going to suggest to any of you that if you are listening and you would like to know more about Beth and her company, head over to chatterkick.com. And better yet, when you're there, chatter chatterkick.com/free dash stuff. Who doesn't want free stuff? And check out some of the things they're sharing and giving away. Thanks again, Beth.
Thank you.
And if you've enjoyed this conversation and you would like to check out other conversations like this, hop over to YouTube, check out our channel, watch videos from our archives. This has been another episode of More Than a Few Words. Thanks for listening.